I don't know any wisdom teaching that says separateness is real. What they do say, as the Tao and the I Ching says, is in the beginning is the one. The one becomes two, the two, three. From the 3, 10,000 things are born. So yes, the differentiation. But that's why I don't use the word duality.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing. And we have an incredible guest that has returned. And as I normally do, I chant the words, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Oh, my God. It's so great to see you again, my dear friend. This is Dr. Jude Currivan, and I want to say that as a cosmologist and a conscious explorer, she offers so many things to the universal understanding of reality. Furthermore, if you haven't seen her on the podcast, you're going to be blown away with the conversation we have today. Welcome, my dear friend.
It's good to be back with you, my dear. Always. Thank you.
Wow, it means a lot that you take any time out of your schedule because you have such a busy one. And my goodness, for any newcomers to the podcast, how about you give a summation of your journey in the most abbreviated version that you can?
I think that's a really good suggestion, because if I talk about my scenic route, it's a long one. But basically, I began my journey of curiosity when I was 4 years old, began to have multidimensional experiences and realized the nature of reality was far deeper, grander, more multidimensional than anything I was being taught at school. But I carried on my journey and got fascinated by how what I was experiencing connected with the world around us. So I have a master's degree in physics, specializing in quantum physics, cosmology. Eventually, because I also very much revere universal wisdom teachings and indigenous wisdom teachings, I have a PhD in anthropological archaeology, researching ancient cosmologies. I've journeyed through international finance. I'm an author, lots and lots and lots of things. But what I do realize now, and I'm so grateful to be back with you, is that all of those threads of my journey actually co-weave now in the way that I hope we'll share some of today, and we shared some of in our last podcast, because we're at an amazing threshold, it seems to me, where leading edge science is converging with wisdom teachings to help us to remember who we really are and to, I think, invite us to consciously evolve.
You had me at hello. Quite frankly, you could just keep talking and I'll just melt into the substance we call the primordial mother and just be just now. That just works for me just fine. Brilliant. So how about we just ask you this question? It's interesting. There's I'm not sure whether you're familiar with a guy by the name of Nassim Haramein.
I am.
Right. Now, what is your interpretation of his latest findings of what he considers the unified field theory and referencing black hole energy, which is something that we briefly touched on, I think, in our last conversation? Is something that's very ancient and indigenous to the cultivational practices of Taoist alchemy. Mm-hmm. What is your take on that in the lens of the numbers, the formulas, the evidence that would reference a theory like that?
Well, before I speak to that, I think, what I share, and I've shared in my most recent books, is all the evidence at many, many different fields of research, not just physics, but across many different fields, including evolutionary biology, including systems theory, all the and collective human behaviors. And also from a cosmological perspective, the study of black holes has been instrumental in us realizing that the appearance of our universe is not its deeper levels of causation. And secondly, that it actually exists and evolves as a cosmic hologram. So there is that projection of cosmic consciousness into the appearance of our world. So black holes are really, really important in terms of that understanding. They're also really important in terms of the evolution of our universe. And we're now coming to a perspective that you don't have to have necessarily the collapse of a massive star at the end of its life, when it can't hold itself up anymore. It collapses inwards into a black hole. And many of those form what's called supermassive black holes at the center of most, if perhaps not all, galaxies. But also there may, in the very early universe, have been a means, it was so dense, there may have been dynamics that enabled supermassive black holes to form without going through that sort of stellar genesis, as it were. So that's all wonderful. My understanding of Nassim's work, and I agree with a lot of it in the sense of an interconnected universe, and the appearance is not its level of deeper causation. But I am concerned about his perspective, for example, before this latest work, on what he calls the proton black hole, because he's really treating protons, not metaphorically, but literally, as minute black holes. And the reason I have problems with that, and if somebody, and including Nassim, can really help me understand differently, but my understanding is that violates some of the basic phenomena of our universe. Because for some, black holes are not stable. They grow. They're not stable. A proton is the most stable particle, if we want to call it that, in our universe for the last 13.8 billion years. The half-lives of protons are probably trillions of years. So I can't reconcile the stability of a proton with the instability, essentially, of a black hole, where there is other matter around it. And with a proton, there is other matter around it. So there's some real issues there that I have with his work. And I don't actually feel that his latest paper actually does what he says it does. Mm-hmm. But I'm not here to criticize anyone, and I'm certainly not going to stand here and criticize Nassim's work. And I think the other thing I would say, at the end of the day, whether I disagree or not, it really doesn't matter, because all of us, I hope, are good enough scientists to follow the evidence wherever it leads. So if the evidence really can support that paper, and at the moment I don't believe it does, then I'm more than happy to consider it afresh. But everything I know so far isn't helping me to be able to support it.
It's so interesting, your insight, because from an intuitive, indigenous sort of alchemy level, from my perspective, teaching these sort of practices, it has a very self-evident realization, visceral realization that this is true to the experiencer, which I've taught people, these ancient practices that reveal the black hole energy using the sort of crystalline elements within the alchemical process. So it's sort of interesting how I would love to somehow help him discover how he could bridge that so that we can sort of validate it to a level that, say, for example,
and the point is, there's many overlaps, given that the whole universe is essentially acts in a sense as a black hole in terms of its, not just its thermodynamics, but the informational dynamics of its boundary. There's a lot of crossover. I think it's the literal nature of everything being a black hole, which it doesn't need to be, because the forces, even at microscopic scales, are substantially more than actually, I would suggest, enable the stability of nuclei. And so, I'm more than happy with the analogies. I'm more than happy with it. It takes us a long way down the line. And I'm also happy with exactly what you're teaching and what you're speaking to.
Yeah. I mean, it's really, it's exciting because there is a merging, and there, at some point, I believe there will be some sort of unified realization for those worlds. How it comes about.
Well, I would say that I've done it in my own work, because by expanding the 3 laws of thermodynamics, which actually I would say are probably more foundational in many ways than quantum physics and relativity, because when you actually expand the 3 laws of thermodynamics to describe energy and matter and to describe space-time, those are the most simple descriptions of quantum and relativistic physics. But you have to go to a level deeper than quantum physics and than energy, matter, and quantum physics and space-time and relativistic physics. You have to go deeper, because you can only get them together when you understand that all of them are underpinned and framed by the meaningful information that is essentially the cosmic consciousness stuff of the reality of our universe. And then it's straightforward, and you don't need any more equations. You don't need any more laws of physics. You don't need any of the, you just need to see with new eyes, and you just need to frame it in a deeper, more expansive way. And then you can appreciate the commonality.
Very, very exciting, my dear friend. Now, what about gravity? Because I had a dear friend of mine who's a physicist, and he is writing a book and completing a book about how gravity pushes us up, not pulls us down. What's that kind of theory? Does that sound sort of like a little obscure for your
No,
lens?
it's not obscure. And I think it's a really, really important, again, investigation. What I would ask your friend is, what does he make of the equivalence of gravity and inertial acceleration? Because for me, they are two sides of the same coin. They're the push me, pull you of the way that energy, matter behaves in space-time. And when I was writing my not most recent book, The Story of Gaia, but the one before that, Cosmic Hologram, I wrote there, and I've written it in a couple of recent papers, that when you actually look cosmologically, more and more the dimensions, the apparent dimensions of our universe, the three of space and the one of time, they come together into a two-dimensional space-time. And that's across many different fields of research. But all of them then, as part of that, tend to be describing gravity, not in terms of a fundamental force, but more a consequence, and a consequence of what's called entropy. And what I describe to that next level of information as entropy, as the meaningful informational content of a system, rather than the energetic microstates. So when you see gravity described entropically, it's beautiful, because it actually also explains why this evolutionary arc of our entire universe has needed gravitational bodies, planets, to be able to nurture the ongoing complexity of ongoing complexity of the world, but biological life. Biological organisms can only differentiate in space and time in a gravitational field. And so the gravitational field and the gradient of that gravitational field as an entropic phenomenon means that it's the natural way, the universal way by which meaningful information can create biological organisms. And so if you look at gravity from that perspective, it ties into all the sort of direction of travel of cosmology as a holographic manifestation as our universe. And it also ties in to the whole informational perspective of the nature of reality. And then it ties in to cosmic consciousness and mind and consciousness, not something we have, but what we in the whole world are. So when you look at gravity in that way, you also understand why, you know, the universe's evolutionary arc, in an incredible story, eventually led to planets, because it's only with that homogeneity, stability, and ability to be what's called a dissipative system. In other words, taking energy, use what you need, get rid of the rest. That's what planets do. And they do it in a gravitational field that then enables those dissipative processes to themselves help evolve greater levels of complexity and individuated sentience. So you don't, if you put a yeast or any cells into microgravity or space, they can't differentiate, because there's no up and down. There's no informational gradient for them to express their bodily structures, their morphologies as.
Wow. So, I mean, now this is sort of like for the audience, we're talking about this understanding of the dualism of this reality, this idea of what electromagnetism is within this
To some degree. I don't though some tend to use the word duality because it tends to imply separation. And what this really is understanding is that reality is real, but separation is illusory. There is differentiation. And I know that's the way of the Tao and all universal wisdom teachings.
Right.
I don't know any wisdom teaching that says separateness is real. What they do say, as the Tao and the I Ching says, is in the beginning is the one. The one becomes two, the two, three. From the 3, 10,000 things are born. So yes, the differentiation. But that's why I don't use the word duality, but differentiation for sure.
Well, perception, right? So perception of this reality would be dualistic. The idea of very sort of polarized.
I would even say a different word of that. If you start with the word duality and you move to polarity, you end up at complementarity. And, sometimes it looks a bit strange and we use the word paradoxical sometimes.
Right.
But rather than paradox, I tend to use the word parallax. And the reason I do that is, again, in astronomy, if you want to measure the distance to a star, what you tend to do is you tend to do triangulation. And so you take an observation at say in June of a year, when the Earth is here around the sun. Then you wait 6 months and you take another observation when the Earth's at the other side of the sun, and you triangulate them. Now that is parallax, because it's actually looking at the same thing from two different perspectives. But it's not paradox, which often we find difficulty in reconciling. It's a parallax, which is a complementary perspectives that we can actually reconcile, because ultimately they're part of the overall wholeness.
It's that unity, that the singular that physicists speak of, right?
Yeah, and even then, we now say, we now appreciate, way back when the Big Bang understanding of the beginning of our universe came into being, there was a huge amount of debate around how did that happen. And for a long time, it was described in terms of singularity. The problem with the singularity is whenever you get a law of physics that actually trends to infinity, something's gone wrong, something's gone pear-shaped. And a singularity was deemed to be the infinite density within a black hole. We now know that there is nothing infinite that is manifested within space-time. So now the perspective is that our universe came into being incredibly small, but at a finite scale, which is named after Max Planck. So at a Planck scale, which is tiny. It's as tiny to an atom as an atom is to the whole universe at its size now. Oh, it's as small as to an atom, literally, as an atom is to the whole universe now. It's minute. It's 10 to the minus 35 meters in lengthwise. So, that's why you'll not tend to find people now at the leading edge talking about singularities in that same sense, because we know that it doesn't trend to infinity. There's a break point, and that may be a dimensional shift.
Right.
But it's
no. Go ahead.
But I was just saying, there's nothing in our universe is finite. It began a finite time ago. Measuring the cosmic microwave background, it only has finite wavelengths. I could go on for a long time about there's nothing infinite in our universe. And that includes a singularity.
Now, you're very familiar with indigenous sort of accelerated levels of ascension, i.e. some type of yogic path, Hindu path, Buddhism, Taoism you've referenced. Within a Taoist accelerated path, you mentioned the word cosmic consciousness. And this is a sort of like an ascended realization of, from an explorer's perspective, what we consider a Taoist seeker is this detachment from all things, an observer, being part of the stream of what we call the Tao, the primordial mother, Wu Ji, which is like this center point of all things. Now, when I describe, or not describe, but experience these type of phenomenon, and I consider that the primordial. So how I would describe it would be, you are creating, as you call it, a hologram, light to wave to matter to particle, realized as your attention, intention, creating, cutting from the cloth of perfection, a distorted reality, which comes in the form of energetic potential that is creating your reality. This is how I share it. The charge you're getting can either indicate that you are feeling this visceral thing as a contraction or expansion. From what I can see, it looks like an expansion, which is good. I'm getting somewhere. And there, you're feeling, and I'm just seeing that from your auric field. So now this is a phenomenon, you call it a PK or psychokinesis, because we're in the same stream consciously. Now, we're always in the same stream. People talk about biofields, but that ability to see is what we call a sensory perception from a Taoist perspective. So I'm seeing the energy, I'm then choosing to feel it, but I can see that oscillating symbiotic expression that we're both having now, unified within this. Now, psychologists might call it a psychodynamic loop. We've created rapport, we're getting into the same substance, but that moment is where I can show someone something more supernatural, paranormal, something that goes beyond precognition, but an actual realized, transmuted 3D experience. That may be a physical healing, a mental, emotional, spiritual healing. What would you define that in? Like a lot of my friends call it Brahman. I just call it the Wu Ji, which is the primordial mother, which for a Taoist is effectively the gateway to what we call Wu Wei, which is effortless action, the flow state. And obtaining that resonance will then deliver this experience of miracles, so-called miracles in this reality. And I've seen it. I don't know whether we've gone over it before, but I've witnessed change. And it's not a reverse hallucination. It's effectively what we consider healing, magic, supernatural. What would you consider that as, from your perspective, having an insight into so many variables?
First of all, I wouldn't call it supernatural or paranormal. I'd call it supernormal.
Yes. Because very few people can understand, they can't understand it. I have examples constantly where they attune to the frequency that I bring to help them, as we call it, remember who they are. So this in turn takes something that's misaligned, I consider it misaligned, and realign them to this frequency that then gives them the ability to regulate their dantians and their energetic potential, and poof, all of a sudden you're off to the races. And I would agree with you, it is super normal. Yet people are not familiar with it. They're so separated from who they really are.
I think that's right. And I love the work you do, because you're helping them to remember who they really are. And, for me, I would describe each of us as being, and I have before when we've spoken, microcosmic co-creators of the reality of our universe. Now, for me, that doesn't mean that I am the universe. But what it does mean is I have access to that universal wisdom, because I'm innately an aspect of that universal sentience. So again, coming back to that perspective, it means that all of us together, and the 8 billion of us that are walking the planet at the moment, and those of us who have different ways of investigating, exploring, experiencing all the rest of it, we've come now to a perspective that we're members of our universe as an existential, meaningfully living, purposefully evolving, vast cosmic thought that is undertaking its own evolutionary arc from its initial simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and individuated awareness. So our universe, in a way, is learning more about itself through its individuated members of its vast communities of life, including ourselves. So for me, because of that, we are inseparable. We are also innately able to embody the attributes of our universe. Now, for me, in this perspective of a physical plane, I have had experiences which don't violate that life story of our universe, but they can transcend its apparent limitations. So our universe exists and evolves such that within space-time, nothing can go faster than the speed of light. That's the cosmic speed. Otherwise, we couldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't have had a journey of 13.8 billion years to get here, all the. And we have access to supernormal attributes and phenomena that mean that that is non-local, that is not limited within space-time, because we're part of the wholeness that is our universe.
So now I just want for the audience to sort of marinate on that. So they're more familiar with how I describe this supernormal, now moment. No place, no person, no thing. The present moment, being able to play with that primordial tapestry because we're all interconnected. Now that in of itself creates this, miracle-based stuff that most people are not familiar with until they are. How do you justify that within your lens of understanding when, I say a physical healing, flesh fused before itself returned to its default state? And it's not a hallucinant. I don't take drugs. I don't take any sort of extra. And this is something that I've been witnessing for 30 years, and it's realized everything from cancer to you name it. I've seen it just unfold and rewire itself back to its original state. Distortion.
I would say that's natural because our universe is innately informational. If you, for example, if you are a cell that has its informational pathways blocked in some way, that cell, even though it might be part of a 37 trillion cell community as a human body, thinks that it's now just a single cell. Yeah. And it fights accordingly. And that's cancer, essentially. If you can reestablish, as you're talking about, the pathways, the informational pathways that actually then realign the coherence of the body, then the body can heal itself in extraordinary, wonderful ways because it's reverting to its natural, healthy, whole template. Yeah?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, baby. Oh yeah. It's awesome because we have this conversation and you have such a vast appreciation for other aspects that are far outside of the norm for most physicists or scientists, which I really am so grateful for you because there are quite a large percentage of your peers in the scientific community that would not have this conversation with me. It's just the way it is, unfortunately. It's what I consider when someone comes from physiology, biology, neurology, psychology, you're limited because you have a pathway. It's a belief system that needs to blossom into a knowing. A knowing, in my opinion, only comes from the experiential moment of now.
I agree. And I feel very fortunate because I had all of my experiences from the age of 4. So when I came to sort of investigation, science as a modality, as a methodology of exploration, I wasn't hampered by the prevailing paradigm of that science, that mainstream science. And what I've loved is after all these years, the leading edge science now is converging with what I've experienced all my life and what universal wisdom teachings have always taught. But if you don't have those experiences, I agree, it's really hard. If you're brought up in the sort of societies that we are, you're educated in the sort of ways we are, which is very siloed, and it's very much based on a paradigm of materialism and separation, it's incredibly challenging to even find the courage to sort of, be open to the possibilities of this. And especially if in an academic environment, which I'm not. I mean, I'm independent and I don't rely on any department to fund me. And I'm very, very, very grateful for the journey I've taken. But now what we're finding as well is more and more young folks who want to be scientists, but they also want to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and they're not afraid of where it leads.
Mm. Well, I mean, and that's it. I mean, what I find is I get students from around the world that want to learn the ancient practice of the alchemical process of Taoism.
Yes.
And when you're able to transmute and generate something in this material state that is from the mind to what they consider reality, is a mastered skill, whether it's being able to generate an electric charge that can then zap the person that you are healing, perhaps as an example, or levitation or telepathy or telekinesis. These are all very tangible and real senses and developmental skills that we've been teaching for a long time. And I'm getting more and more scientists that are interested in wanting to measure this. The parapsychologists that want to, take it from a more of a structured viewpoint of ideomotor response, creating sort of like remote viewing. This dialogue between a conscious and unconscious process, being able to substantiate what it is that you're experiencing. And I use the physical flesh as a tuning fork. That when you maestro and you're able to access that primordial Wu Ji, you then can literally take that tapestry, and from a visual perspective, when you cultivate these practices, everything has a seeming gold layer to it that can be moved as a magnetic pull, that you can move these things in this material space, that through the senses that you're developing, you're able to literally conduct feats of supernatural, as you put it, or super normal experiences that people just cannot fathom. They just get super excited. It's like when you have someone like Stan Lee, rest in peace, my dear friend, who created this so-called fantasy land of a multi-universe, was far from fantasy. It was more in tune, a lot more with the ideas of the scientific community today, from a multidimensional level of what reality is supposed to be like. Yet, back in the 50s, when he was creating things like Spider-Man and the Hulk and all this kind of stuff, it seemed so imaginary, so delusional, but fantastic, because everyone wants to believe that something like that is possible. Yet we're becoming more and more clear that is, when you attune to that. How would you describe the easiest path to attune to something like this? I'm very familiar with how I teach people. I've been doing it for 30 years, and it bears the fruit of a very well refined method that you can define within precognition and other measurable scientific experiments to deliver a response. How would you do it?
I don't think there's a simple answer to that, because, to be honest, I've been doing this for nearly 70 years. And so, I have my own experiences, and they range from precognitive through psychokinetic to clairsentience, to clairaudience, to clairvoyance, to levitation, the whole gamut, really. And so I rather than how would I do it, I think the invitation from the universe is to each and every one of us. How would you do it? I think the universe is inviting us to ask each and every one of us, how would you do it? And it's bringing teachers such as yourself and incredible teachers that can help be companions along the way. So, there'll be many, many folks who come to you, and have that resonance with you, and you are their perfect companion and guide on this journey. There are going to be others that, you know, choose a different path. But for me, all paths lead to the top of the mountain if you continue far enough down them. And so it's what path resonates with each of us. I mean, mine was because of those very early experiences. Mine was wanting to continue to have those experiences because they were just joyous. They were heart-filling, they were soul-filling, they were, you know, and I was always curious. So I don't think it's a question of what would you do? It's a question of an invitation that the universe is asking each of us, and how we each respond will actually then, you know, take us down whatever path we're willing to go on. And some of us say, no, I don't want to go on that path. And some of us can't wait. And some of us have got to such a point in our own lives that we're desperate. We're desperate to find a path. And I think when that happens, in my experience, the universe, you know, this was the story, when the student's ready, the teacher will come. And I think there are many, 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 many examples of that.
Amen to that, my dear friend. I mean, yeah, I refer to it as the student is the teacher is the student.
Exactly.
When you cease to inquire and desire to seek,
exactly,
you are dead in the water in relation to what my dear friend James Tunney would say is spiritual consciousness, awakening of some sort would cease to be present. There would be no more evidence of that. It would just end.
Yeah, there's no communication, because ultimately all of this is about meaningful information. The universe, we're in constant multidimensional dialogue, multilogue, all the time, whether aware of it or not. So what your teaching does so magnificently, it invites people into a conscious experience of that innate relationship.
I mean, I love the way you refer to levitation. I teach people levitation, and people are like, okay, well, hang on a second. You're a big guy. You're a burly guy. There's only 3 people I've ever met in my life journey consciously in the last 30 years that have been able to levitate. 2 were in Indonesian gurus in the jungles of Indonesia that I trained with, and then 1 is a student of mine that I taught how to levitate. And they go, well, if you taught them how, why aren't you doing it? Because it doesn't excite me. It doesn't excite me. These sort of what people consider supernatural, paranormal things does not excite me, other than I want to see physical healing, mental, emotional, spiritual healing. That excites me. And for that, just like Oliver Twist, you want more, boy? Yes, sir. May I have another? Yes. Well, I will give you more of what you are asking for, which is kind of like the understanding of the universe, right? The mirroring effect of, if you want more, you will receive more. This sort of resonance. And did you experience it through just a mystical sort of realization, or was there a method that you used to experience the levitation?
Neither. I was in Egypt. I have written about this, but I was in Egypt many, many years ago, and we went to a place called Abydos, and I'd never been there before in this life or any realization of that. But when I arrived, it was very familiar to me. And I went into, first of all, there's the sort of more recent temple there of Seti, the second, I think it is. And at the back, there are 3 chapels, small chapels, one dedicated to Osiris, one to Isis, and one to Horus. So I went from one to the other, and in the little chapel of Osiris, I said something really stupid. I said, I am ready to learn. I'm ready to learn. And suddenly I started crying, to the extent, you know, when you really cry, you can hardly see because there's so many tears coming out. And so I was crying, and yet I also knew that I needed to go through the temple, at the back of the temple, and then to a place called the Osirian, which I hadn't really appreciated at that point, was dedicated to the initiations of Osiris. Okay. So I went down, and there was nobody else around. The folks I was leading, they'd gone off and done something else. And I went back to the back of the temple. First time I recall being there, but I knew where I was going. And I went outside and I went down, and the Assyrian is very, very ancient. So it's way beneath the sort of the current land level, the ground level. So I went down there, and it's so far down that there's water in it, usually about sort of 4 inches of water from the sort of the groundwater around it. And in those days, you could sort of go into it. I don't know that you can anymore, but you could go into it. And so you go down a little sort of wooden staircase. So I saw the water, and I pulled my sort of jeans up to my knees. And I walked down the stairs, and I walked 2 steps into the Assyrian, and I fell down a shaft, which was absolutely full of water. And I've tried to Google it since, and nobody seems to know how deep it is, except it's extraordinarily deep. And as I was going down and the water was coming over my head and I was sinking, I wasn't panicking. I was thinking, this is the initiation of Osiris. And immediately, with that thought, I found myself sitting on the top of the steps, soaking wet. And within a moment, within a minute, I didn't climb out. I didn't have any, literally. And the only way I can describe it is I literally levitated. Once that initiation, which I'd realized, that was the initiation, and I literally levitated onto the step.
That is profound. It just gets me excited because I kind of refer to the type of stuff I take people on a path of as Big Trouble in Little China meets The Last Airbender, and they had a baby. And that's the type of stuff, because that's always excited me as a young boy. And I think that's why my teachers presented themselves through my journey and consciously being aware that they'd always been guiding me. At that point, 30 years ago, when I channeled my teacher Latsu, and then I discovered the path of being a priest in Taoism and all this kind of business. This is all wrapped in a belief system. It only becomes a knowing when you can experience it for yourself, when it's self-realized. And so that, to me, is absolutely profound. Now, for me, there's a processes of blending the elements of platinum, gold, and silver, and you absorb it within the primordial womb, and that seed creates this ability to literally disperse any weight of the physical body, like it disappears. And when you hold that resonance, it will be revealed. Where I've seen my student raise up 6, 8, 10 inches off the ground in a lotus position. Now, that to me is profound. Does it excite me that I want to spend the amount of time that it takes to concentrate and develop that skill? No, because even from that perspective, there was a physical drain of energy potential that took place from being able to derive and cultivate that. And there's definitely a passing where we talk about the cosmic consciousness, and how I explain it to people is there's a literal detachment. So how I look at reality now is it's a blank slate. It's actually void and black. And so with my eyes open, the only time things become potential and are created is when I put my intention to it. So everything else fades away, and my ability to instantly become no place, person, or thing is how it generates a result that would be considered, whoa, how is that possible? Physical healing, manifestation, magic, all this kind of stuff. This is sort of a state that you get in where you're not attached to what would be the human condition. So no longer are you drawn to or taken away from an emotional state or anything around you. You are just now. Does this sound like something similar to any experiences that you've had?
Many, actually, many. And it is that sense of the present, literally the here and the now. you know, and it's so, how can I put it? I mean, going back to the Planck scale for a moment, the Planck scale of time is 10 to the minus 44 seconds. That's the tiniest time frame. That is literally the present moment in our finite universe. And I'd love us to have more conversations about this, because people talk about quantum consciousness. What we're talking about is informational consciousness. And when we do that at the Planck scale, it means we're literally going to that moment, that here and now moment, that's the closest we can to infinity within our finite universe. And it's the bridge, it seems to me, with our consciousness to transcend that finite perspective and truly transcend into that eternal here and eternal now and infinite now. So eternal now and infinite here. But it's that ability which we have, it's innate to us. So what you're doing is working with the wisdom of thousands of years. And the Tao surely is one of the most profound wisdom paths that we have, because it innately respects, it honors, and it's fundamental that mind and consciousness aren't what we have. They are literally what we in the whole world are. So it's actually entering that state of gnosis, of experiential gnosis of that perception.
Again, you're wooing me, Jude. You're wooing me even more. I mean, I describe that the decipherer of reality as the Wu-Ji, and the decipher is the symbol of that. The symbolic gesture is the yin and yang symbol. Yeah. People can literally decipher their reality using this symbol. And understanding that, and that charge you and I got now, it's like we are the aha, we are the Sherlock to the Watson, we are taking the crumbs, and elementary, my dear Watson, elementary. And it really is so exciting, because this is really the now moment. And people, from a Taoist perspective, we always talk about the bellows. Just perceive reality as a bellows. Everything is contracting, expanding at the same time. And then this is where I lose a lot of people. Are like, oh, too much woo-woo for me. And that's really where you understand that the respiration can reveal itself to you. The respiration will give you, opening and closing your eyes will give you everything. Sleeping and awaking will give you everything. Starting and ending things will give you everything that you need to really ascertain what your reality is. But that Wu-Ji point is between the breath in and the breath out, that you enter the gateway of the primordial mother, which creates the Wu-Wei, which is the effortless action.
I agree, and I'm conscious we only have a few more minutes left. But if we have time to just explore that a little bit more, because I've always felt a profound resonance and respect for that incredibly simple yet amazingly profound yin-yang symbol. And most folks will appreciate that it's a circle. So it is the wholeness of creation that's then delineated into the sort of the light of the yang with the dark of the yin coming out, and the dark of the yin with the yang coming out. But what fascinates me, or fascinated me from very early on, is the wave that flows between them. Because for me, that wave is the ever-present here and now point of creation and creativity, that actually is the dance of the yin and the yang, and the wave on which creation, itself dances. And, in Vedic tradition, of course, there is the Ida, the Pingala, and the Shushumna. So you have that child essence. So it's not just the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the out-breath, the in-breath, the yin, the yang. It's that when that complementarity comes into its integration, then the whole, Shushumna of the divine child is awakened. And I didn't add one more piece on that levitation story. As I sat on the top of the stairs, soaking wet, I suddenly became on fire. And I was on fire for 3 days internally. And it was a kundalini. It was a spontaneous kundalini rising. And that was the Shushumna finally activating within me. And that is the initiation, I think, of Osiris, because when that happens, the water and the fire come together, and Osiris and Isis conjoin in the sacred marriage and birth the Horus of the divine child. So it's like all the this journey you're on, this journey you're teaching is just so extraordinary, and I'm just so delighted that you're doing it.
I'm really grateful the joy and bliss that the two of us get from our conversation. In closing, I'll just say to you that, you know, from that perspective, from a Taoist, it's the merging of supreme purity, jade purity, highest purity.
Yeah.
Supreme purity is the light, upper dantian. Jade purity is the information, which is the middle dantian, and highest purity is the energy, which is the lower dantian, which is really the creation of all things, which reverts back to the primordial mother.
Beautiful.
We've had a brief conversation about we need to do that again and go deeper into that and reveal to the audience more about what that really means on the journey of alchemy, and then furthermore how you receive it within your own merging of this energy. But they're the keepers of the cosmos from birth to creation of the three pure ones, and it always resorts back to the primordial mother. So there's this, from, as someone would simplistically talk, from the void to the seed within the primordial womb, basically bursts the creation of all things, which would potentially reference something that might be similar to a Big Bang. But then there's that cycle of 9 that is evident in everything that we do within a Taoist path, which then would refer to from conception to birth of human life, which people go, holy moly. Yes, the universe can be referred to as the uterus, and then people go, how does yang be created from yin, or furthermore, how does yin be created from yang? And then we have this incredible conversation that leads into so many other things. So again, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your time with me today. I will ask you in closing, what is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
I wouldn't differentiate. Spirit is like spiritual, consciousness, spiritual. Consciousness is spiritual. Consciousness is everything. Consciousness is all pervasive, all that is, all that has ever been, all that ever will be. And I'm not talking about human consciousness here. I'm talking about universal and cosmic consciousness. So, you know, I don't differentiate spirituality from anything else. A dear friend of mine is Elizabeth Sartoris, evolutionary biologist and an absolute maestro. She talks about piano keyboard. And she talks about the lower notes as the physicality, and then into the emotional, the mental, the spiritual. But she says the problem is that, you know, if you see spiritual as being separate, or you see physical without having that aspect of, it's like you're missing half of the piano keyboard, but it's all the piano keyboard.
Right. It's so beautiful. It's just this ongoing thing where you find that there's obstacles created from your seeking that really do separate you from that knowing. So you literally sit back. I feel like psychology is an experiment to separate you.
I think because it's been taught from a paradigm of materialism and separation. It's come out of the physics of materialism and separation. It's come out of that old paradigm that's now been completely turned on its head. So it's no surprise that it does what it does, because it's being based on that perspective. That, you know, the physical world is all there is, and it's a world of materialism, it's a world of separation.
And here we have just another crumb, my dear Watson. One more crumb, and we are on our path.
But the game's afoot. The game's afoot.
Yes, it is. And furthermore, we will continue this conversation in the future, my dear friend. I'm so grateful to have had a little bit of time with you. You are so magical and mystical, and you warm my heart, and I'm very grateful to have a friendship with you, my dear friend.
Well, bless back at you, my dear, and have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again soon. So
And
thank you so much, San.
we will talk soon. Thank you. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.
Lots of love, everyone. Bye for now.